Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. So find a comfortable spot, adjust your volume, take a nice deep breath in, let it out slowly, and off we go. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to welcome some new people to our Patreon family. Paul, Michelle, and Corey. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. Your help makes it possible to keep making new episodes week after week and keep them ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. And because you became supporters in March, you'll all be entered into this month's raffle for your very own copy of the 1897 Sears catalog. It's quite a trip into the past, and I think the winner will love it. If you're interested in learning about the perks available to subscribers on Patreon, you'll find a link in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where supporters can leave a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. And thank you so much to everyone who's done so far. Now, let's get to the reading. Tonight we're returning to The History of Animals by Aristotle, written in 10 books, translated by Richard Cresswell, M.A., St. John's College, Oxford, published in 1887 by George Bell and Sons, York Street, Covent Garden, London. Let's pick up where we left off. Book the First, Chapter 7, in which Aristotle details the parts of the body. These are the principal parts into which the whole body is divided: the head, neck, trunk, 2 arms, and 2 legs. The whole cavity from the neck to the pudenda is called the trunk. That part of the head which is covered with hair is called the cranium. The forepart of this is called the sinciput. This is the last formed, being the last bone in the body which becomes hard. The hinder part is the occiput, and between the occiput and sinciput is the crown of the head. The brain is placed beneath the sinciput. The cranium is a thin spherical bone covered with a skin without flesh. The skull has sutures. In women there is but one placed in a circle. Men have generally 3 joined in one, and a man's skull has been seen without any sutures at all. The middle and smooth part of the hair is called the crown of the head. In some persons this is double, for there are some people double-crowned, not from any formation of the bone, but only from the division of the hair. Chapter 8. The part immediately beneath the cranium is called the face in mankind alone, for we do not speak of the face of a fish or of an ox. The part immediately beneath the sinciput and between the eyes is called the forehead. Those in whom this feature is large are tardy. Those who have a small forehead are easily excited. A broad forehead belongs to those who are liable to be carried away by their feelings. A round forehead is a sign of a passionate disposition. Under the forehead are 2 eyebrows. If they are straight, it is a mark of a gentle disposition. The eyebrows bent down to the nose are an evidence of an austere temper. If they incline towards the temples, of a mocker and scoffer. If they are drawn down, it is a sign of an envious person. Beneath these are the eyes, which by nature are 2 in number. The parts of each eye are first the upper and under eyelid, the edges of which are furnished with hair. Within the eye, the moist part with which we see is called the pupil. Round this is the iris, and this is surrounded by the white. 2 corners of the eye are formed at the junction of the eyelids, one in the direction of the nose, the other towards the temple. If these corners are large, they are a sign of an evil disposition. If those near the nose are fleshy and have a swollen appearance, they are evidence of wickedness. All other classes of animals have eyes, except shellfish and some other imperfect creatures. The white of the eye is generally the same in all animals, but the iris is very different. In some it is black, in others decidedly gray, in others dark gray, and in some it is the color of the goat's eye, and this is a sign of the best disposition, and is most to be prized for acuteness of vision. Man is almost the only animal which exhibits a variety of coloring in the eye. There are, however, some horses with gray eyes. The eyes of some persons are large, others small, and others of a moderate size. The last mentioned are the best. And some eyes are projecting, some deep-set, and some moderate. And those which are deep-set have the most acute vision in all animals. The middle position is a sign of the best disposition. Some people have an eye which is perpetually opening and closing. Others have an eye always intent, and others a moderately intent eye. This last is the best disposed. Of the others, the one is impudent, and the other a sign of infirmity. Chapter 9. The part of the head by which we hear but do not breathe is the ear. For Alcmaeon is mistaken when he says that goats breathe through their ears. One part of the ear has not received any name. The other part is called the lobe. The whole ear is made up of cartilage and flesh. Internally, the ear has the nature of a shell, and the last bone is similar to the ear itself. The sound reaches this part last, as it were in a chamber. There is no passage from the ear into the brain, but there is to the roof of the mouth, and a vein extends from the brain to each ear. Man is the only animal with ears that cannot move them. Among animals which have the faculty of hearing, some have ears, and others, as winged and scaly creatures, have no ear, but an open orifice in the head. All viviparous animals except the seal and the dolphin and other cetacea have ears. The Selachia also are viviparous. The seal has open orifices by which it hears. The dolphin can hear, though it has no ears. All other animals can move their ears, but man alone does not move them. The ears of man lie in the same circle with his eyes, and not above them as in some quadrupeds. The ears are either smooth, hairy, or moderate. These last are the best for hearing, but they do not in any way indicate the disposition. They are large or small or middling, or they are erect, or not at all, or only moderately erect. The moderately erect are a sign of the best disposition. Large and erect ears are an evidence of foolish talking and loquacity. The part of the head between the eye and the ear is called the temple. In the middle of the face is the nose, the passage for the breath, for through this animals inhale and exhale, and through it also they sneeze. This is the expulsion of a concentrated breath, and is the only kind of breathing which is esteemed ominous or sacred. Moreover, inhaling and exhaling is into the chest, and without the nostrils it is impossible to inhale or exhale, for inhaling and exhaling is from the breast by the windpipe, and not from any part of the head. But it is possible to live without this respiration through the nostrils. The smell also resides in this part. This is the sense of odor. The nostril is very movable, and not naturally immovable like the ear. One part of the nose, namely the division between the nostrils, is cartilaginous, but the passage is empty, for the nose is formed of two divisions. In the elephant, the nostril is very large and strong, and it answers to the purpose of a hand, for the animal can extend it, and with it take its food, and convey it to its mouth, whether the food is moist or dry. This is the only animal that can do so. There are also two jaws, the upper and the under. All animals move the lower jaw except the river crocodile, and this moves the upper jaw only. Below the nose are two lips, the flesh of which is very movable. The mouth is the center of the jaws and the lips. The upper part is called the roof of the mouth, the lower the pharynx. The tongue is the organ of taste. This sense resides in the tip, and if food is placed on the broad part of the tongue, the taste is less acute. The tongue partakes of all the other sensations, as harshness, heat, and cold, as well as that of taste, in common with the rest of the flesh. The flat part of the tongue is either narrow or moderate in size. The moderate is the best, and most apt for clear elocution. The tongue may be either too loose or tied down, as in stammerers and inarticulate speakers. The flesh of the tongue is porous and spongy. The epiglottis is a portion of the tongue. The double part of the mouth is the tonsils. That in many divisions the gums, they are fleshy, and in them are fixed the bony teeth. Within the mouth there is another part, the uvula, a pillar filled with blood. If this part is swelled with relaxation, it is called a grape and chokes. Chapter 10. The neck is the part between the head and the trunk. The front part is called the larynx. Behind this is the esophagus. The voice and the breath pass through the front part, the trachea, which is cartilaginous, but the esophagus is fleshy and placed farther in, near the vertebra of the neck. The back of the neck is called the apomus. These are the parts as far as the thorax. The parts of the thorax are some before and some behind. First of all, below the neck is the breast with two mammae. On these are two nipples through which the milk of the female passes. The mamma is porous. There is also milk in the breasts of men. The flesh of the mamma in men is thick. In women it is spongy and full of pores. The part below the thorax in front is the belly, and of this the navel is the center. Beneath the center, the part on each side is called the iliac region. The part in the center beneath the navel is called the hypogastric region. Above the navel is the epigastric region. The lumbar region is situated between the epigastric and iliac regions. Of the hinder parts, the loin forms the division of the body, whence also its name is derived. The part of the central region which is like a seat is the buttock. That on which the thigh turns, the cotyledon. The part of the body which joins the neck and the breast is called the jugulum. That which unites the side, the arm, and the shoulder is the armpit. The region between the thigh and the hypogastric region is called the groin. The part common to the thigh and the buttock on the inside is the perineum. That of the thigh and buttock on the outside is called the hypogluteus. We have previously treated of the trunk. The hinder part of the breast is called the back. The parts of the back are two shoulder blades and the backbone. Below the thorax and opposite the stomach are the loins. The ribs belong both to the back and the front of the trunk, and are 8 on each side. For we have never heard anything worthy of credit concerning the Ligees, who are said to have 7 ribs. Chapter 11. Man has upper and lower side, the front and the back, and right and left side. The right and the left are nearly alike in their parts, and in every particular, except that the left side is the weaker. But the back parts are not like the front, nor the lower parts to the upper, except in this particular, that the parts below the hypogastric region are full-fleshed or lean in proportion to the face, and the arms also answer to the proportion of the legs. Those persons who have a short humerus have also generally a short thigh. Those who have small feet have also small hands. One of the double parts of the body is the arm. The parts of the arm are the shoulder, humerus, elbow, cubitus, and the hand. The parts of the hand are the palm and 5 fingers. The jointed part of the finger is the condyle, the unjointed part the phalanx. The thumb has but 1 joint. All the rest have 2. The bending of the arm and finger is always inwards. The arm is also bent at the elbow. The inner part of the hand is called the palm. It is fleshy and divided by strong lines. Long-lived persons have one or two lines which extend through the whole hand. Short-lived persons have two lines not extending through the whole hand. The joint of the hand and arm is the wrist. The outside of the hand is sinewy and has not received any name. The other double part of the body is the leg. The double-headed part of the leg is called the thigh. The movable part is called the patella. That which has two bones, the tibia. The front of this part is the shin, the hind part the calf of the leg. The flesh is full of sinews and veins. In those persons who have large hips, the flesh is drawn upwards towards the hollow part under the knee. In those who have not, it is drawn down. The lowest part of the shin is the ankle, and this is double in each leg. The part of the leg with many bones is called the foot, the hind part of which is the heel. The front part is divided into 5 toes. The under part, which is fleshy, is called the sole of the foot. The upper part, the instep, is sinewy and has not received any name. One part of the toe is the nail, and the other is the joint. The nail is on the extremity of the toe, and the toes are bent inwards. Those who have the sole of the foot thick and not hollow, but walk upon the whole of the foot, are knavish. The common joint of the thigh and the leg is the knee. Chapter 12. These parts are possessed in common by the male and female. The position of the external parts, whether above or below, before or behind, on the right side or the left, will appear on mere inspection. It is necessary, however, to enumerate them for the reasons which I have mentioned before, that its proper place being assigned to each part, any difference in their arrangement in man and other animals may be less likely to escape our notice. In man, the parts of the body are more naturally divided into upper and lower than in any other animal, for all the upper and lower parts of the body are arranged according to the order of nature above and below. In the same way also, the fore and hind parts, and those on the right and left, are placed naturally. But in other animals, some of these parts are either not at all so placed, or they are much more confused than in man. The head is placed above the body in all animals, but in man alone, as we have said, is this part corresponding to the order of all things. Next to the head is the neck, then the breast and the back, the one before and the other behind, and each of them in the following order: the stomach, loins, pudenda, haunch, then the thigh and leg, and last of all the foot. The legs have the joint bent forwards, in which direction also is the manner of walking, and the more movable part of the legs, as well as the joint, is bent forward. The heel is behind. Each of the ankles is like an ear. From the right and left side come arms, having the joint bent inwards, so that the flexures both of the legs and arms are towards each other, especially in man. The senses and the organs of sense, the eyes, nostril, and tongue, are in the same position and in the anterior part of the body, but the hearing and its organ, the ears, are at the side and upon the same circumference as the eyes. Man has his eyes closer together in proportion to his size than other animals. The sense of touch is the most accurate of the human senses, and next to this, the taste. In the rest of his senses, he is far surpassed by other animals. Chapter 13. The external parts of the body are arranged in this manner, and as I have said, are for the most part named and known from habit. But the internal parts are not so well known, and those of the human body are the least known, so that, in order to explain them, we must compare them with the same parts of those animals which are most nearly allied. First of all, the brain is placed in the forepart of the head, and it occupies the same position in all animals that have this part, which belongs to all sanguineous and cephalopodous animals. In proportion to his size, man has the largest brain of all animals, and the moistest. 2 membranes enclose the brain. That outside the skull is the strongest. The inner membrane is slighter than the outer one. In all animals, the brain is in 2 portions. The cerebellum is placed upon the brain at its lowest extremity. It is different from the brain, both to the touch and in appearance. The back of the head is empty and hollow in all animals in proportion to their size, for some have a large head, but the part lying under the face is less in those animals which have round faces. Others have a small head and large jaws, as the whole tribe of Lophuri. In all animals, the brain is without blood, nor does it contain any veins, and it is naturally cold to the touch. The greater number of animals have a small cavity in the center of the brain, and around this a membrane filled with veins. This membrane is like skin and encloses the brain. Above the brain is the smoothest and weakest bone in the head. It is called sinciput. 3 passages lead from the eye to the brain, the largest and the middle-sized to the cerebellum, the least to the brain itself. The least is that which is nearest the nostril. The greater are parallel and do not meet, but the middle-sized passages meet. This is most evident in fishes, and these passages are nearer to the brain than the larger, but the least separate from each other and do not meet. Within the neck is the esophagus, which also derives its additional name, the isthmus, from its length and narrowness, and the trachea. The trachea lies in front of the esophagus in all animals which possess this part. that is, all animals which breathe from the lungs. The trachea is cartilaginous in its nature and contains but little blood. It is surrounded with many smooth rings of cartilage, and it lies upon the upper part towards the mouth, opposite the passage from the nostril to the mouth. Wherefore also, if any liquid is drawn into it in drinking, it passes out of the mouth through the nostrils. Between the passages is the epiglottis, which can be folded over the passage which extends from the trachea to the mouth. By the epiglottis, the passage of the tongue is closed. At the other extremity, the trachea reaches to the middle of the lungs, and afterwards divides to each side of the lungs. For the lung is double in all animals which possess this part, though the division is not so marked in viviparous animals, and least of all in man. The human lungs are anomalous, neither being divided into many lobes as in other animals, nor being smooth. In oviparous animals, such as birds and the oviparous quadrupeds, the parts are very widely separated, so that they appear to have two lungs. They are, however, only two divisions of the trachea extending to each side of the lungs. When the trachea is filled with air, it distributes the breath into the cavities of the lungs, which have cartilaginous interstices ending in a point. The passages of these interstices go through the whole lungs, always dividing from greater into less. The heart is connected with the trachea by fatty and cartilaginous muscular bands. There is a cavity near the junction, and in some animals, when the trachea is filled with breath, this cavity is not always distinguishable. But in larger animals, it is evident that the breath enters it. This, then, is the form of the trachea, which only inhales and exhales breath, and nothing else, either dry or moist, or it suffers pain till that which has passed down is coughed up. The esophagus is joined to the mouth from above, near the trachea, being united both to the spine and the trachea by membranaceous ligaments. It passes through the diaphragm into the cavity of the stomach, is fleshy in its nature, and is extensible both in length and breadth. The human stomach is like that of a dog, not a great deal larger than the entrail, but like a wide bowel. After this, there is an entrail simply rolled together, then an entrail of moderate width. The lower part of the abdomen is like that of a hog, for it is wide, and from this to the seat it is short and thick. The omentum is united to the abdomen in the middle, and is in its nature a fatty membrane, as in other animals with a single stomach and teeth in both jaws. The mesenterium is over the bowels. It is membranaceous, broad, and fat. It is united to that great vein and the aorta. Through it extend many numerous veins at its junction with the intestines, reaching from above downwards. This is the nature of the esophagus, trachea, and the parts of the abdominal cavity. Chapter 14. The heart has 3 cavities. It lies above the lungs, near the division of the trachea. It has a fat and thick membrane, by which it is united to the great vein and the aorta, and it lies upon the aorta near the apex. And the apex is placed in the same situation in all animals which have a chest. And in all animals, whether they have or have not a chest, the apex of the heart is forwards, though it often escapes notice by the change of position in the parts when dissected. The gibbous portion of the heart is upwards. Its apex is generally fleshy and thick, and there is a sinew in the cavities. In all other animals which have a chest, the heart is placed in the center. In man, it is rather on the left side, inclining a little from the division of the mammae towards the left breast in the upper part of the chest. It is not large. Its whole form is not long, but rather round, except that the extremity ends in a point. It has 3 cavities, as I have said. The greatest is that on the right, the least on the left. The middle one is of intermediate size. They are all perforated towards the lungs. It has both the 2 smaller, and all of them perforated towards the lungs, and this is evident in one of the cavities downwards from its point of attachment. Near the principal cavity it is attached to the great vein, to which also the mesenterium is united, and in the middle it is attached to the aorta. Passages lead from the lungs to the heart, and they are divided in the same way as the trachea, following the passages from the trachea throughout the whole lungs, and the passages leading from the heart are on the upper part. There is no passage which is common to them both, but by their union they receive the breath and transmit it through the heart. For one of the passages leads to the right cavity and the other to the left. We will hereafter speak of the great vein and the aorta in the portion of our work which treats of these parts. In all animals which have lungs and are viviparous, either internally or externally, the lung has more blood than all the other parts, for the whole lung is spongy, and through each perforation branches of the great vein proceed. Those persons are deceived who say that the lungs are empty, drawing their conclusion from dissected animals, from which all the blood has escaped. Of all the viscera, the heart alone contains blood, and in the lungs the blood is not in the lungs themselves, but in the veins by which they are perforated. But in the heart itself the blood is in each of the cavities, but the thinnest blood is in the middle cavity. Beneath the lungs is that division of the trunk which is called the diaphragm. It is united to the ribs, the hypochondriac region, and the spine. In the center is a smooth membranous part, and there are veins extending through it. The human veins are thick in proportion to the size of the body. Under the diaphragm, on the right side, is the liver, on the left the spleen, alike in all animals which are furnished with these parts in their natural form and without monstrosity. For already there has been observed an altered order in some quadrupeds. They are joined to the abdomen near the omentum. The appearance of the human spleen is narrow and long, like that of the hog. Generally speaking, and in most animals, the liver is not furnished with a gall, though this is found in some animals. The human liver is round, like that of the ox. This is the case also in animals offered for sacrifice, as in the district of Chalcis, where the sheep have no gall, and in Naxos it is so large in nearly all the animals that strangers who come to sacrifice are surprised, and think that it is ominous and not at all natural. The liver is united with the great vein, but has no part in common with the aorta, for a vein branches off from the great vein through the liver, at the place where the gates of the liver, as they are called, are situated. The spleen also is only connected with the great vein, for a vein extends from this to the spleen. Next to these are the kidneys, which lie close to the spine. In their nature, they are like the kidneys of oxen. In all animals that have kidneys, the right kidney lies higher than the left, and is covered with less fat, and is more dry than the left. This is the same in all animals. Passages lead from them to the great vein and to the aorta, but not to the cavity. For all animals, except the seal, have a cavity in their kidneys, though it is greater in some than in others. The human kidneys, though similar to those of oxen, are more solid than in other animals, and the passages that lead to them end in the body of the kidney, and this is a proof that they do not pass through them, that they contain no blood in the living animal, nor is it coagulated in them when dead, but they have a small cavity, as I have said before. From the cavity of the kidneys, 2 strong passages lead to the bladder, and 2 others, strong and continuous, lead to the aorta. A hollow, sinewy vein is attached to the middle of each kidney, which extends from the spine through small branches and disappears towards the hip, though it afterwards appears again upon the hip. The branches of these veins reach to the bladder, for the bladder is placed lowest of all, being united to the passages which proceed from the kidneys by the neck, which reaches to the urethra, and nearly all round its circumference it is united by smooth and muscular membranes, very similar in form to those upon the diaphragm of the chest. The human bladder is moderately large in size, and the pudendum is united to the neck of the bladder, having a strong passage above and a small one below. One of these passages leads to the testicles, the other, which is sinewy and cartilaginous, to the bladder. From this are appended the testicles of the male, concerning which we will treat in the part devoted to their consideration. These parts are the same in the female, who differs in none of the internal parts except the womb, the appearance of which may be learned from the drawings in the books on anatomy. Its position is upon the entrails. The bladder is above the uterus. In a future book, we will speak of the nature of the uterus generally, for it is not alike, nor has it the same nature in them all. These are the internal and external parts of the human body, and this is their nature and their manner. Book the Second, Chapter 1. Of the parts of other animals, some are common to them all, as I have said before, and some belong to particular classes, and they agree and differ in the manner often before mentioned. For almost all animals which differ in kind have also their parts different in form, and there are some which have only a proportionate resemblance, but differ in kind, and others agree in kind, but not in form, and many parts belong to some which others have not. Viviparous quadrupeds have a head and neck, and all the parts of the head, but they differ from each other in their forms. The lion has one bone in the neck, but has no vertebrae, and when laid open, its internal parts are like those of a dog. Viviparous quadrupeds have 4 legs instead of arms, and in all quadrupeds, especially those which have the 4 feet much divided, they are analogous to hands, for they use them as hands. And the left legs are less at liberty than in men, except in the elephant, and this animal has the toes less perfectly jointed, and its forelegs much larger than the hind ones. It has 5 toes and short ankles to its hind legs. It has a trunk of such a nature and length as to be able to use it for a hand, and it drinks and eats by stretching this into its mouth. This also it lifts up to its driver and pulls up trees with it. With this organ it breathes as it walks through the water. The extremity of the proboscis is curved but without joints, for it is cartilaginous. Man is the only ambidextrous animal. All animals have their chest analogous to man, but not similar to his, for he has a wide chest and theirs is narrow. No animal but man has pectoral mammae. The elephant has 2 mammae, but not on the breast, though they are in that direction. All animals, excepting the elephant, bend both their fore and hind legs in contrary directions, and also contrary to the way in which a man's limbs are bent. For in viviparous quadrupeds, except the elephant, the joints of the forelegs are bent forwards, and those of the hind legs backwards, and they have the hollow part of their circumference opposite to each other. The elephant is not constructed as some have said, but is able to sit down and bend his legs, but from his great weight is unable to bend them on both sides at once, but leans either to the right side or the left and sleeps in this position, but its hind legs are bent like a man's. In oviparous quadrupeds, as the crocodile, lizard, and such like, both the fore and hind legs are bent forwards, inclining a little to the side, and likewise also in other animals with more than 4 feet, except that the middle joint of their last pair of legs is always doubtful, and is rather bent towards the side. And man also has both the flexures of his limbs in the same direction, and those of his arms and legs contrary to each other. for he bends the arm backwards, except that the external part of the arm is a little inclined inwards, towards the side. The legs bend forwards. No animal bends the joints both of its fore and hind legs backwards. The flexure of the cubitus and foreleg is in a contrary direction to the flexure of the shoulder in all animals, and the flexure of the knee is contrary to that of the hip, so that since man bends his joints in the contrary direction to many animals, those which have such joints as man's also bend them in a contrary direction to many animals. Birds bend their limbs in a direction similar to that of quadrupeds. For being bipeds, they bend their legs backwards, and have wings instead of arms or forelegs, and these bend forwards. The seal is like a maimed quadruped, for immediately beneath the scapula it has feet like hands, as are also those of the bear, for they are 5-fingered, and each of the fingers has 3 joints and a small claw. The hind feet are 5-fingered, and each of the fingers has joints and claws like those upon the forefeet. In shape, they are very like the tail of a fish. The movements of animals, whether they have 4 feet or more, are in the direction of the longer diameter of their bodies, and thus also they stand. The commencement of motion is always on the right side of their bodies. The lion and the camel, both the Arabian and Bactrian, walk with the hind foot following the forefoot on the same side, and this means that the right foot is not put before the left, but follows it. And with that, I think we'll end this evening's reading from History of Animals by Greek philosopher and scientist Aristotle. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. The description also includes links to ways you can support this podcast, either by becoming a member of our Patreon, where you'll get exclusive episodes heard nowhere else, or by dropping us a one-time tip via buymeacoffee.com. No subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check those out. And thank you to everyone who supported us so far. You make it possible for us to keep making new episodes week after week and keep them ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. I'm so glad you could join me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.